People think rules don't apply once you hang a flag on your porch. Marcus Ellison didn't move. The Missouri sun carved a halo off the hood of his truck, and the VA card in his hand caught the light, a flash of quiet proof that he had earned his place here. Malloy's mouth twitched. "Go on, show me that fake ID you printed in your basement." He snatched it before Marcus could speak. "What's this supposed to be, soldier boy? VIP access to pity?" Then came the sound, paper tearing, small, cruel, final. Fragments of the veteran's ID floated to the ground like ash. For a second, even the wind forgot how to move. A mother in a minivan froze mid-step. The air around the parking lot thickened into silence. Marcus straightened, jaw tight. "That's destruction of federal property," he said quietly. 18 U.S.C. 1361. Malloy tilted his head, pretending to listen. "Cute. You memorized that in boot camp, Professor?" He took half a step forward, close enough for Marcus to smell the bitter coffee on his breath. "Around here, the law's whatever I say it is." The pharmacy clerk watching from behind the window mouthed, "Don't move." "I served this country," Marcus said, calm as a heartbeat. "You're supposed to serve it too," Malloy chuckled, low and ugly. "And I'm serving it by keeping suspicious types off private property." His fingers flexed. "Now get back in your truck before I decide you're resisting." It would have been easy to back down, to let the moment rot into another quiet humiliation. But Marcus had seen this play before. The uniform, the swagger, the sudden conversion of pride into offense. He looked at the broken plastic by his boot and said evenly, "Name and badge number, please." The officer's smile dropped. "You threatening me?" "No, sir." "Then shut your mouth." Phones lifted now. First one, then 3, then 5. Their red recording dots blinked like tiny alarms no one could unhear. Malloy didn't notice. He shoved Marcus hard in the chest. "ID refusal! You're obstructing!" The crowd gasped. Marcus took the hit but didn't raise his hands higher than shoulder level. "You're making a mistake!" "Oh, am I?" Malloy barked, pulling his cuffs free. "Hands behind your back, hero!" A child's voice called from the line of cars. "Mom! Why's he arresting that man?" Nobody answered. "Turn around," Malloy ordered, twisting Marcus's wrist. "You people always got an excuse. Veteran, church man, working man. You all sing the same song." Marcus inhaled through his nose. "You just destroyed my identification on camera." Malloy's eyes flicked toward the nearest phone, then back. "That's not a camera," he said. "That's interference." "Sir," Marcus repeated softly. "You're on cam 3, northwest corner of the plaza. Red light's blinking." The cop froze for half a beat, then forced a laugh. That thing's been down for months, but he was wrong. The city had upgraded its system 2 weeks earlier, 9 high-definition units feeding directly into the municipal cloud. Every second of this was being written to an unerasable log. "Step away from the entrance," Malloy said again, voice louder now, playing to the onlookers. "This man's being detained for trespassing." "Trespassing?" Marcus echoed. "I parked in a public space with a disabled vet tag. My wife's prescription is inside. Look at the timestamp. 3:15 p.m. pickup. Save it for the judge." He shoved Marcus toward the hood of the truck. The metal burned against sun-heated skin. From behind the glass, the pharmacist, Nadia Reyes, pressed her phone to her ear, whispering to whoever picked up, "Body cam off, but the dome cam's on. Record everything." Malloy reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. Need backup at Rivergate Plaza. Possible forgery suspect. Refused lawful order." The words rolled out smooth, practiced, each syllable meant for later playback. Marcus's voice was steady. "Officer, I advise you to retrieve the torn ID from the ground. That's government evidence." Malloy leaned close enough for the microphones to catch the hiss. "The only evidence here is that you people don't know when to quit," Slur implied. Quiet, vicious, followed. Someone in the crowd flinched. The insult landed like static across the lot. Marcus didn't answer. He'd learned long ago that silence can be sharper than shouting. "Hands behind your back!" Malloy barked again. The cuffs clicked. The air shimmered. Time slowed. Every phone in that parking lot caught the same frame. A black veteran in handcuffs beside the truck with the bumper sticker that read, "Freedom isn't free." The irony was too perfect for fiction. Across the street, an ambulance bay alarmed once, the faint whine of a helicopter unit lifting off from the nearby VA hospital. Nobody noticed yet. Inside the pharmacy, the clock ticked past 3:18. The register pinged a digital log entry. Pickup overdue, customer Ellison, order 54291. The computer automatically backed up the transaction to the chain's cloud at 3:19:02 p.m., the exact moment Marcus was pushed against his hood. A woman's voice cut through the heat. "You can't do that!" "He didn't do anything." Malloy turned his head. "Ma'am, step back or you'll be detained too." She lowered her phone but didn't move. "See?" he muttered, pressing harder on the cuffs. Always an audience. Marcus's breathing slowed. "You really should check that camera, officer." "What camera?" "Northwest corner." "Cam 3. Malloy laughed again, but this time it faltered. He'd filed a maintenance report about that camera 2 months earlier. Claimed it was inoperable, but he hadn't known the city contracted a new vendor, Skyhold Cloud Systems, for redundant storage. At 3:20 p.m., that feed synced to a server 60 miles away. Frame 1009-2 captured the torn ID, Malloy's hand on Marcus's chest, and a half-dozen faces watching. "Sir," Marcus said once more, "my son works for the National Guard. He'll be here any minute." Malloy grinned. "Then he can watch his daddy get processed." The phrase twisted something in the crowd. The clerk inside the store whispered, "Oh my God, he really said that." One of the bystanders stepped forward, camera raised. "Officer, your body cam light's off." "You're supposed to have that on." Malloy turned his fury toward the new voice. "Interfering with police procedure is a misdemeanor." Another voice, younger, shaking but firm, answered, "No, it's not, unless you're lying." The cop's face reddened. "Back off!" Marcus straightened as much as the cuffs allowed. "You ever wonder why they tell us to keep receipts, officer?" "Excuse me?" "Because paper remembers what people forget." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The sound of rotors began to pulse faintly from the distance, a deep, rhythmic chopping that grew louder with each second. Malloy frowned, glancing toward the western horizon. "What the hell is that?" The crowd began to look up, phones tilted skyward. "Helicopter from the hospital," someone murmured. "They land here sometimes," Malloy scoffed. "Not in my parking lot," but the sound grew heavier, closer, slicing the humid air. Dust swirled around their feet. Marcus lifted his head slightly. "You sure about that?" The officer started to answer, but the wind from the approaching chopper drowned him out. Rotor wash whipped at their clothes, tearing the edge of Malloy's hat free. Papers from the pharmacy door flew like startled birds. The engine noise became a roar that filled the plaza, commanding attention in a way no badge could. A khaki-painted medevac helicopter descended slow and deliberate, its skids kissing the faded yellow lines just 20 yards away. The designated emergency zone, freshly repainted 2 days earlier under Marcus Ellison's maintenance contract with the city. Malloy shielded his eyes, shouting, "What the hell's going on?" The door slid open. A figure in a flight suit stepped out, helmet under one arm, visor glinting. The crowd gasped as the pilot jogged toward them. Marcus turned his head slightly, expression unreadable. The pilot stopped 10 feet away, wind still thrashing around them. "Sir!" the young man called, voice clear over the chaos. "Dad, you okay?" Malloy blinked, disbelief mixing with sudden unease. "Dad?" The pilot reached into his pocket and pulled out a laminated permit. "Emergency landing authorization, Rivergate Plaza helipad, permit number 4525, signed by the property owner, Marcus Ellison," the crowd murmured. The officer's jaw fell open. Marcus looked straight ahead. "Told you he'd be here." Malloy took a half step back, the wind whipping his uniform. For the first time that afternoon, he didn't look in control. The helicopter idled behind them, rotor blades slicing the sunlight into pieces. Every phone was up now. Every lens caught the tableau, a black veteran in cuffs, a uniformed cop blinking against the dust. and a pilot standing between them holding paperwork that said everything without a single raised voice. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, approaching. Inevitable. Marcus spoke softly, almost to himself. Receipt number 1. And as the helicopter's engine settled into a steady hum, the look on Malloy's face changed from arrogance to something closer to realization. The first flicker of understanding that the world was recording, and this story was no longer his to control. The wind carried a single line from Marcus, steady and unbroken. I didn't bring anger, officer. I brought the paperwork. Phones captured every word. Have you ever watched instant karma descend from the sky? Keep watching. The next part isn't noise. It's justice learning how to land. The courtroom smelled faintly of paper, polish, and power. 2 hours after the parking lot incident, Officer Brent Malloy sat in uniform at the witness stand, posture crisp, voice steady, his confidence restored by fluorescent light and protocol. Behind him, the state flag hung perfectly still, a symbol that always seemed to bend toward whoever spoke first. Your Honor, Malloy began, glancing at his notes, though he'd already memorized every line. At approximately 17 hours, I observed a suspicious male loitering near the pharmacy entrance of Rivergate Plaza. He spoke slowly, deliberately, each syllable crafted to sound official. The subject refused to identify himself when asked and became verbally aggressive. For officer safety, I was forced to detain him. Minimal force was used. No injuries observed. The substitute judge, Arthur Reeds, 70, pale, thinning hair combed with courtroom precision, nodded approvingly. His gavel hand twitched, eager for resolution. And the defendant's name? Marcus Ellison, Malloy replied. Claimed to be a veteran but had no verifiable identification. Produced what appeared to be a counterfeit government ID. I confiscated it to confirm its authenticity. He didn't mention that the ID had been torn in half. He didn't mention the phones, the crowd, or the helicopter. Then what occurred? The prosecutor, Sandra Bell, asked. The subject resisted lawful commands. When backup arrived, I released him pending further verification. He later returned, attempting to escalate the situation with false accusations of misconduct. Malloy smiled faintly, the kind of smile meant for cameras. This is unfortunately a pattern we've seen before, individuals exploiting their background or identity to deflect from suspicious behavior. In the gallery, half the audience nodded. The script was familiar, a calm voice, a badge, a reasonable explanation. Across the room, Marcus Ellison sat at the defense table, hands clasped, posture straight. The bruise on his wrist peaked just above the cuff of his jacket. He hadn't spoken once. His eyes stayed on Malloy, not in anger but in study. The way a man watches whether he already knows will break. Officer, the judge said, were there any witnesses who corroborate your statement? Yes, Your Honor. 2 responding officers, Daniels and Harris, as well as surveillance footage confirming the subject's erratic behavior prior to detainment. He tapped the folder in front of him. Cam 3 at the plaza, though unfortunately the recording suffered a technical malfunction. The IT report confirms data loss between 15:16 and 15:18 hours. The prosecutor nodded sympathetically. Those systems fail often, don't they? Malloy's smirk widened. More than we'd like, ma'am. A few quiet chuckles rolled through the courtroom. Your Honor, Sandra Bell continued, the state moves to admit Officer Malloy's incident report into evidence as Exhibit A, along with sworn statements from Officers Daniels and Harris as Exhibits B and C. Judge Reeds lifted his pen. So admitted. Marcus's attorney, Naomi Pike, a public defender barely out of law school, stood hesitantly. Your Honor, may I request the opportunity to cross-examine the witness? Reed sighed. Briefly, Counselor. Let's not turn this into a fishing expedition. Naomi stepped forward, the tremor in her voice masked by professionalism. Officer Malloy, you stated that the defendant became aggressive and refused to identify himself? Yes. Did you issue a formal order to produce identification? Yes, ma'am, twice. And when he complied, or when he handed you the ID, what did you do? I examined it. Did you damage it? Malloy hesitated half a second too long. No, ma'am. A ripple moved through the gallery. barely audible but felt. Naomi continued. Are you aware that the defendant's ID has been recovered, torn vertically through the center? I am not, Malloy said smoothly. It must have been damaged in the altercation. Naomi nodded slowly. So your sworn testimony is that you didn't destroy it? That's correct. She flipped a page. Are you also aware that multiple witnesses claim to have seen you verbally insult the defendant before placing him in cuffs? Objection, the prosecutor cut in. Hearsay. Sustained, Judge Reed said instantly. Naomi pressed on undeterred. Did you or did you not refer to the defendant with a racial slur? Malloy's voice didn't waver. Absolutely not. Naomi paused, studying him. So the crowd, the clerk, the bystanders, they all fabricated that? I can't speak to what civilians imagine, Counselor. I can only state what occurred. In the back row, a young reporter from the Riverbend Gazette scribbled that line down. Naomi exhaled slowly. One final question, officer. Is it your testimony that Cam 3 at Rivergate Plaza was malfunctioning during the incident? Yes. And who signed the maintenance report for that camera last month? Malloy blinked. I did. The courtroom went still. Naomi nodded once. No further questions. Reeds waved his gavel. Thank you, officer. You may step down. Malloy smoothed his uniform and returned to his seat, chin high. His confidence had cracks now, but he wore them like badges, visible, defiant. Sandra Bell turned toward the jury box. The evidence speaks for itself, Your Honor. This was a routine detainment complicated by a non-compliant individual. We cannot criminalize officers for performing their duties, the judge leaned back. Agreed. Unless new evidence arises, I see no grounds for escalation. Dismissed with caution. Malloy exhaled. The tension left his shoulders. Another day, another near miss. But the word caution lingered in the air like a faint alarm, unheard but felt. At the defense table, Marcus finally spoke. His voice was even, quiet, but the kind that made people lean forward to hear. Your Honor, may I address the court briefly? Reeds frowned. This isn't a press conference, Mr. Ellison. With respect, sir, I'm not here to give a statement. Just a request. Naomi touched his arm gently, whispering, Careful. Marcus nodded once. I'd like to enter a preservation order for all video recordings from Rivergate Plaza, including backup servers and body cam sync files from 1510 to 1525. Chain of custody under Section 6 and 10.100, Missouri Revised Statutes, the courtroom murmured. Judge Reeds blinked. You seem familiar with legal procedure, Mr. Ellison. I've had to be, Marcus replied. The judge adjusted his glasses. Fine. The court acknowledges the request, though I doubt it will change the facts. Marcus's gaze didn't move. Facts have a way of surviving, sir, even when memory doesn't. For the first time, Malloy turned to look at him. Really look. The veteran's calm unnerved him. That stillness wasn't submission. It was patience. In the gallery, a uniformed police technician, Officer Kendra Lee, assigned to digital evidence, shifted in her seat. She'd heard that phrase before, backup servers. It wasn't supposed to be public knowledge that Sky-Hold Cloud replicated every camera feed citywide. She felt the weight of it now, the hearing adjourned. The crowd spilled out in murmured clusters, half sympathetic to Malloy, half uncertain. Malloy lingered in the hallway, greeted by familiar handshakes. Tough break, Brent, someone said. Don't worry, I'll clear you. He nodded, performing relief. But his palms were slick. Outside, Marcus stepped into the sunlight, cuffs gone but dignity frayed. Reporters circled. He said nothing, just lifted the torn ID pieces from his pocket and pressed them together, a wordless symbol of what the system had split. A voice behind him. Mr. Ellison? It was Officer Lee. She glanced around before speaking. Sir, for what it's worth, Sky-Hold backups don't delete. Not even when the system says they're down. Marcus studied her. Then the truth's still out there. She nodded once. And if you file that FOIA fast, it'll have to be preserved. He offered a faint smile. Guess I know what I'm doing tonight. Back inside, Malloy typed his supplemental report. Incident. He replaced verbal disagreement with combative subject. He replaced Tor ID with confiscated counterfeit. Each word another coat of paint over rust. He didn't notice the timestamp at the top of the report, identical to the one on the auto backup he'd forgotten existed. At the courthouse entrance, the red recording light above camera 7 blinked once, then twice, then uploaded. By the next morning, someone in IT would notice an anomaly in the metadata. A 4.3 GB file labeled Rivergate Camera 3 Backup stored in the city's audit archive. It would bear a single tag, Sync Integrity Verified, and that's where the official story would begin to unravel. Justice moves quietly at first, a file, a timestamp, a whisper. Then one by one, the lies start losing oxygen. The Rivergate Municipal Building never slept. It just dimmed its lights and pretended. At 1:03 a.m., a single monitor glowed in the records division, showing the familiar blue interface of Skyhold Cloud Access Console. Each line of data was a thread in a web. Camera, 3 Rivergate, sync verified. A city tech named Elena Cortez, night shift, leaned forward in her chair. She'd seen anomalies before, corrupted uploads, mismatched metadata, but this wasn't that. This was perfect. Too perfect. A body cam gap that matched a plaza cam spike. 2 systems, 1 moment. She took a screenshot. 010412, time-stamped. SHA 256, checksum appended. Receipt number 2. Meanwhile, in a small apartment on the edge of Riverbend, Marcus Ellison sat at his kitchen table surrounded by paperwork. The halves of his torn ID lay between 2 sheets of wax paper like a wounded flag. Beside it, his phone displayed an email draft. 2, records, riverbendpd.gov, subject, formal FOIA request, Rivergate Plaza surveillance. July 12, 2025, body, pursuant to Missouri Revised Statutes, paragraph 610.100 and the Federal Freedom of Information Act, I request the immediate preservation and release of all relevant recordings from body-worn cameras, patrol vehicles, and municipal security systems between 1510 and 1525. He hit send at 0108. The city servers logged the request. By 0830, the Riverbend Police Department's internal affairs inbox had flagged it high priority. And by noon, Malloy's name was quietly added to a review list he didn't know existed. But Marcus wasn't done. He called the Skyhold support line, quoted his own case number, and asked for audit verification. The rep on the other end paused. Sir, may I ask how you knew this file existed? Because truth leaves a trail, Marcus said simply. By 5 p.m., a reply arrived. Confirmed, Rivergate Camthra Backup 071225 MP4, archived and unaltered. He read the line twice. Then 3 times before forwarding it to his attorney. The game had changed. Officer Malloy, meanwhile, was back in uniform. Standing before his captain, Howard Mills, 28 years on the force. A man carved from policy and denial, sir. The subject's trying to pull records, Malloy said, tossing a printed FOIA notice onto the captain's desk. Some kind of activist thing. Mills scanned it. We'll stall it. Legal'll say the file's corrupted or under investigation. Happens all the time. Malloy exhaled, relief visible. Appreciate that, sir. Don't appreciate it yet. The captain's tone darkened. The city's got a new cloud vendor. Those backups don't die easy. You sure you logged that camera as down? Yeah, maintenance request last month. Signed? By me. Mills looked up. Then pray you didn't spell your name right. At the courthouse, Officer Kendra Lee, the quiet tech from the hearing, printed a sealed disc and slid it into an interdepartmental envelope. On the label, for legal review, do not delete. Inside, the full file. Clear video of Malloy tearing the ID, the crowd, the slur, the shove. She didn't include her name. Chain of custody would tell its own story. At 10:42 a.m. the next day, a delivery clerk dropped the envelope at the public defender's office, marked Records Division Transfer. Naomi Pike opened it, expecting routine evidence logs. Instead, her monitor filled with color, sunlight, Asphalt, the unmistakable edge of a VA card caught between two fingers, and then torn in half. She froze. Rewind, play, pause, timestamp. 15:17 to 38. The missing 90 seconds that Malloy swore didn't exist. Receipt number 3. Naomi's pulse quickened. She checked the metadata. Authentic. Not a copy. Verified chain of custody hash. She called Marcus immediately. Mr. Ellison, she said, voice tight. We have it. The footage. The entire thing. Silence on the other end. Then we're not done. At Internal Affairs, Captain Mills's phone rang. The voice on the other line wasn't local. This is Special Agent Thomas Gray, DOJ Civil Rights Division. We've received a preservation alert from your system. I'm forwarding a subpoena for all material relating to Officer Brent Malloy, case 250712A. Mills stiffened. That's premature, Agent Gray. Internal review's ongoing. Not anymore, the voice said. Federal oversight begins now. By 3 p.m., word spread through the department like static. Malloy's under federal review. He laughed it off in the locker room, but the sound came out wrong. They'll find nothing, he told his partner. Guy's just another agitator looking for headlines. His partner didn't answer. Back in Marcus's apartment, a laptop screen glowed with open tabs. 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. Missouri Revised Statute 565.83, assault on a special victim. He wasn't looking for revenge. He was building a record and a fortress of facts. He replayed the footage again. Malloy's smirk. The paper tearing. The crowd gasping. The moment sunlight caught the torn halves mid-air like confetti made of shame. Pause. Screenshot. Timestamp. 15:17:40. Angle. Cam 3, Northwest. He opened a document titled Exhibit Log. Ellison v. Riverbend PD line by line. He entered video evidence. Cam 3. Officer Malloy ripping VA identification. Timestamp 15:17:38. Audio evidence. Crowd cell phone number 2. You people always got an excuse. Skyhold metadata verification email 7/13/25/1702. Police dispatch log anomaly. Unit 12 marked in contact at 15:16, but body cam failure filed at 15:18. 2. Minute discrepancy. FOIA acknowledgement receipt A77129. Each item was a nail in the narrative's coffin. At the DOJ office in Kansas City, Special Agent Gray reviewed the footage. We've got our probable cause, he said flatly. Pattern check his file, his analyst typed fast. In seconds, the screen filled with complaint data. Malloy, Brent A. 14 prior complaints, 6 for unprofessional conduct, 3 for excessive force, 2 for false reporting, 1 for property mishandling, 2 for racially charged language, all unsubstantiated. Pull settlement records. Gray said 3 popped up. 2019, $65,000. 2021, $120,000. 2024, $47,500, pattern confirmed. 2 days later, Malloy was summoned to IA. The conference room was windowless, cold. His captain, a legal advisor, and 2 men in suits waited. Officer Malloy, Agent Gray said, sliding a folder across the table. Recognize this? Malloy frowned. Inside, a photo still from Cam 3, his hand mid-tier, the VA card visible. That's evidence, Gray interrupted, with timestamp, hash signature, and audio verification. Malloy swallowed. That footage was supposed to be down, Gray finished. Yeah, we read your maintenance report. You signed it the same day Skyhold switched to redundant sync. Bad timing. The air tightened. Do you deny making the following statement? Gray read aloud. You people always got an excuse. Malloy stared at the table. No? Then we're clear, Gray said. You'll remain on administrative leave pending formal charges. Outside IA, reporters had already gathered. Word travels faster than policy. Naomi Pike's office had leaked nothing, but FOIA files are public by design. By dusk, the headline was everywhere. Body cam footage emerges in veteran ID incident. DOJ confirms investigation. Inside his kitchen, Marcus watched the news quietly. The footage looped behind the anchor's voice. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He just whispered, "Receipt number 4." In the weeks that followed, subpoenas spread like wildfire. Skyhold logs, dispatch call records, email threads between Malloy and his superiors. Every bite preserved. A paper trail too long to bury. Even the police union began to distance itself. Pending review, the statement read. For the first time in years, the city's blue wall showed cracks, and in one of those cracks, truth was finally seeping through. Because systems, like lies, don't collapse all at once. They unravel, one receipt, one voice, one camera at a time. The air in the courthouse felt thinner that morning. Cameras lined the hallway like metallic eyes. Reporters whispered about leaked footage, about a veteran's ID torn in half, about federal oversight knocking on Riverbend PD's door. Inside courtroom 2B, the atmosphere was sterile. No shouting, no chaos. Just the hush that comes before something irreversible. Officer Brent Malloy sat rigid at the plaintiff's table. His jaw was clean-shaven, his badge polished to mirror brightness. Appearance, he'd been taught, was armor. His attorney, a departmental counsel named David Rohner, whispered, "Keep answers short, yes or no, no speeches." Across the aisle, Marcus Ellison entered quietly, wearing a tailored dark suit, shoulders squared, expression unreadable. His attorney, Naomi Pike, carried a slim folder and a calm she didn't have 2 weeks earlier. She'd seen the footage, she'd heard the DOJ calls, and she knew that this was no longer a case about trespassing. It was about truth finding its footing. Case 25-0712A, Ellison v. City of Riverbend, the clerk announced. Hearing on motion to dismiss Honorable Arthur Reeds presiding. Reeds cleared his throat. We'll keep proceedings concise. The state moves to dismiss on grounds of insufficient cause. Officer Malloy, your statement stands as last submitted. Naomi rose. Your Honor, before any dismissal can be considered, the defense must review supplemental evidence, specifically Exhibit E. The Skyhold cloud file authenticated by the DOJ Civil Rights Division. Reeds blinked. Exhibit E? Yes, Your Honor. She nodded to the clerk, who dimmed the lights and started playback. The courtroom screens flickered. For 3 seconds, static. Then, sunlight. Asphalt. A veteran's hand holding an ID. The room was silent except for the hum of the projector. Malloy's voice filled the air, casual and venomous. You people think rules don't apply once you hang a flag on your porch. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. The footage continued. The rip of the card, the shove, the slur. Every word Malloy denied under oath was now playing in high definition. Reeds leaned back, jaw tight. Mr. Rohner? The attorney shifted uncomfortably. We can't authenticate that as unaltered. Naomi handed him a sheet of paper. Hash verification from Skyhold's redundancy audit. Chain of custody intact. DOJ confirmed. Reed scanned it, exhaled. Proceed. The clip ended with Marcus's voice calm and unbroken. I didn't bring anger, officer. I brought the paperwork. When the lights came back up, the courtroom's gravity had changed. Naomi's voice was soft, deliberate. Your Honor, my client has been publicly humiliated, physically assaulted, and falsely accused. But there's an additional fact that hasn't yet been disclosed, a fact that directly impacts the legitimacy of the initial detainment. Reeds frowned. And that is? Naomi stepped aside. Marcus rose. Your Honor, he began, voice measured. The incident in question took place on private property. Rivergate Plaza. Reeds nodded. Yes, the shopping center. Yes, Marcus said, which is owned by Rivergate Holdings, LLC. He paused, then placed a cream-colored envelope on the bench. I'm the managing partner. The statement landed like a quiet explosion. Malloy blinked. You're what? Marcus turned slightly toward him, not gloating, not smiling. The property owner. Filed May 3, 2025, deed number 45127A. It's in the county registry. Naomi opened the folder and displayed the deed, notarized and sealed. My client holds full controlling interest in the Rivergate Plaza complex, including the lot where the incident occurred. Officer Malloy trespassed on his property while committing assault. Whispers filled the courtroom. A few reporters stood scribbling notes. Malloy's attorney muttered, "We need a recess." "Denied," Reed said sharply. "Continue." Naomi clicked her remote again. "Cam 6, south angle." The screen lit up with a secondary feed. The same moment from a different view, this time showing the police cruiser parked squarely under a private property. Owner permit required sign. Reed's voice was flat. "Officer Malloy, did you have permission to conduct enforcement on this lot?" Malloy's throat bobbed. "It's routine patrol, Your Honor." "Under whose authorization?" "Standard jurisdiction." Reeds tapped his gavel. "Read the sign, officer." Malloy hesitated. "Enforcement by contract only, Rivergate Holdings, LLC." The courtroom murmured again. Naomi looked at the judge. "The contracted enforcement officer referenced there isn't Malloy, Your Honor. It's Security Logistics, Inc., a private firm my client employs." Meaning, Officer Malloy's presence was not only unauthorized, it was illegal. Reeds turned to Malloy. "You entered private property without cause, initiated contact, destroyed identification, and detained the owner of said property. Do you grasp how that looks?" Malloy opened his mouth, closed it again. His pulse drummed visibly at his temple. Naomi wasn't done. "And there's more." She gestured to the back of the courtroom. "Permission granted for testimony from Lieutenant Aaron Ellison, Missouri National Guard." A young man in uniform stepped forward, the same pilot from the plaza. He saluted briefly before speaking. "Sir, I executed an emergency landing on Rivergate Lot 14 under FAA Part 135 authorization. My father, Marcus Ellison, is the designated safety officer for that zone." Reeds blinked. "Safety officer?" Aaron nodded. "Filed with city records when Rivergate Holdings registered the helipad as an EMS emergency use site in 2023. Permit 452V, valid through 2027. The gallery erupted in murmurs again. Reeds raised his gavel. "Order!" Marcus remained still, gaze steady. "The officer accused me of trespassing on my own property. My son's landing zone, the one that saved 2 civilians last month, was the same spot he claimed was off-limits. So I asked the court who exactly was trespassing." The silence that followed was the kind that lives in headlines. Reeds leaned forward slowly. "Mr. Ellison, you're telling this court the officer destroyed federal ID, entered your property without consent, and detained you on false grounds?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And that you possess recorded evidence and documentation confirming both ownership and lawful activity?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge exhaled, long and low. "Then this case isn't about trespass. It's about misconduct." Malloy's attorney stood abruptly. "Your Honor, the state was unaware of these ownership documents. We request—" "Sit down, counsel," Reed snapped. "You should have known." The courtroom's air shifted again, from curiosity to reckoning. Marcus remained quiet, the image of composure. Naomi stepped closer to the bench. "Your Honor, in light of these revelations, we move for immediate referral to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and a federal inquiry under 18 U.S.C., paragraph 242, deprivation of rights under color of law." Reeds didn't hesitate. "Motion granted." Malloy's face drained of color. "You can't—" "I can," Reeds said coldly. "And I just did." Naomi gathered her papers. "Thank you, Your Honor." But Marcus didn't move. He looked directly at Malloy, voice low but steady. "You said in that parking lot that the law was whatever you said it was." "I told you it wasn't anger I brought. It was paperwork." "Welcome to the filing system!" The gallery erupted with whispered disbelief. Malloy slumped in his chair, eyes darting between the judge and the veteran he'd once called a suspect. Reeds stood. "This hearing is adjourned pending federal oversight. Officer Malloy, you will surrender your badge and weapon to Internal Affairs by end of day. Until further notice, you are suspended without pay." The gavel came down once, sharp and final. Outside, reporters swarmed. Questions flew like shrapnel. Marcus said nothing, just walked past the cameras, briefcase in hand, his son following a few paces behind. One journalist shouted, "Mr. Ellison, what do you say to those who claim this was retaliation?" He stopped, turned slightly, and answered without heat. "Justice isn't retaliation. It's correction." Then he kept walking. By sunset, the footage of the hearing had gone viral. Hashtags filled timelines. Gaz paperwork, prevails, helipad justice, Ellison reversal. In every clip, one sentence stood out. "I didn't bring anger. I brought the paperwork." At the Riverbend PD, officers watched in silence. Some cursed under their breath. Others sat motionless. In the evidence room, the technician Elena Cortez updated her chain of custody log and locked the Skyhold drive in a steel cabinet marked Federal Review, Do Not Delete. Receipt number 5. Justice, like flight, depends on lift. And in that courtroom, Marcus Ellison had just learned to make the truth rise on its own. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division operated out of a building that never slept. Rows of fluorescent light hummed softly over binders, coffee rings, and stacks of human stories disguised as paperwork. At 7:46 a.m., Special Agent Thomas Gray opened a new file on his screen. Ellison v. Riverbend Police Department. Preliminary Pattern Inquiry. He scrolled through the contents. 42 pages of internal reports. 63 complaint logs, 7 settlement documents. The system didn't whisper guilt. It printed it in Times New Roman. "Play the footage again," Gray said. The monitor lit up with the Plaza video. Malloy's voice cracked the silence. "You people think rules don't apply once you hang a flag on your porch." The analysts didn't flinch. They'd heard worse. But something about the calm in Marcus's response unsettled them. "I didn't bring anger, officer. I brought the paperwork." Gray paused the clip. "That line's going viral." His partner, Agent Raquel Voss, tapped her keyboard. Public sentiment's shifting. City Council called an emergency oversight session for next week. But look at this. She dragged a data overlay across the screen, 15 years of use of force records mapped across Riverbend. Each red dot marked a complaint. Each cluster a pattern. "Malloy's beat looks like a rash," Gray murmured. Voss nodded. 207 arrests over the last 5 years. 78% black males. Force report rate, 61%. City average, 14%. Receipt number 6. At the same hour, in Riverbend PD's Internal Affairs conference room, Captain Mills stared at a table full of printed charts. The DOJ's subpoena had arrived in full color. Every line item bled context. Complaint log extract. Officer B. Malloy, 2010, 2025, 2012. Used unnecessary force during routine traffic stop. Subject hospitalized. Unsubstantiated, 2014. Property seized, not logged in evidence. Unsubstantiated, 2017. Racial slur during arrest. Witness corroborated. Closed. No discipline, 2019. Excessive force complaint filed by minor. Settled. 75,000 to 21. Unlawful search without warrant. Dismissed. IA backlog 2023. Body cam deactivated prior to incident. Counseled, no formal reprimand. 7 pages. 47 entries. Mills rubbed his temples. He'd defended every one of them. "Jesus, Brent," he muttered under his breath. Across from him, IA investigator Tara Hanley flipped through her own file. "Look at the body cam activation data. His camera failed 14 times in 15 years, all coinciding with use of force reports. Odds of random malfunction." She tapped her pen. 1 in 50 million. Receipt number 7. Meanwhile, Marcus sat at his kitchen table reading the same data under a DOJ-provided protective order. His eyes moved slowly, deliberately across each page. The list didn't shock him. It just confirmed what he'd always known, that systems protect themselves better than they protect citizens. At the bottom of page 4, a line caught his eye. 2024. Complaint C9934. Civilian property destroyed during ID verification. Case dismissed for lack of evidence. Camera offline. Marcus exhaled. Same words. Same excuse. He turned the page. City expenditures. Settlements involving Officer Malloy, 2010-2024. Total, $2,324,000 average payout per incident. $77,000 are source of funds. Municipal risk pool, taxpayer liability. Every dollar of protection paid for by the people he'd hurt. Receipt number 8. In Washington, the DOJ media team debated how to frame the findings. Agent Gray stood by the window, staring out at the Capitol dome. "We don't spin it," he said finally. "We document it. The numbers are the story," Voss nodded. "Then we add the human part." She opened a side file. Demographic disparity analysis, Riverbend. PD bar graphs filled the screen. Years 2010 through 2024. Arrests of white suspects, down 28%. Arrests of black suspects up 42%. Use of force up 63%. 2 decades, she said quietly. And no corrective action. Gray rubbed his jaw. "This isn't a bad apple, Raquel. It's an orchard." By afternoon, the Riverbend mayor's office received the preliminary summary DOJ memorandum. Subject, preliminary findings. Riverbend PD pattern or practice inquiry date, July 29, 2025, documented racial disparity in arrest and use of force rates, 2010-2025. Internal affairs oversight failures in complaint adjudication, 47 complaints. 0 sustained. Unreported settlements totaling 2.3 million repeated body cam deactivations. During civil rights-related incidents, supervisory. Negligence across 3 captains and 2 chiefs' signature. Thomas Gray, special agent in charge. The mayor read it twice before calling her communications director. "Do we fight it?" The director hesitated. "Ma'am, you can't fight math." The story hit national media that evening. NBC, headline, Federal Probe Uncovers. Years of misconduct in Missouri Police Department. CNN. Crawl, Veterans Viral Video Sparks, DOJ. Investigation into Systemic Racism Local Station. Riverbend 8. I brought the paperwork. Marcus Ellison's words. Ignite nationwide audit of police accountability. Clips replayed the plaza footage in endless loops, followed by graphs, statistics, and legal excerpts. Inside living rooms across the country, people sat forward, because for once, the receipts weren't whispered, they were televised. In the Riverbend PD's locker room, officers watched in silence. Some cursed. Others simply stared. One rookie muttered, "We all knew he pushed lines, but damn." Malloy sat alone, scrolling his phone, eyes bloodshot. Every network carried his face. Every quote he'd denied was now evidence. He muttered, "That's not the whole story," but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. At City Hall, the Oversight Committee convened. Agent Gray presented his findings before the council. On a large monitor behind him, a chart appeared titled, Complaint Resolution Trends, Riverbend PD, 2010-2025. A solid blue column represented filed. Barely visible sliver represented sustained, out of 1,147. Civilian complaints? Gray said calmly. Only 3 were upheld. That's a sustain rate of 0.24%. The national average is 7.6%. He clicked again. The chart morphed into dollar signs. Taxpayers funded $4.7 million in settlements during the same period. The department has never disciplined a single officer in connection with those payouts. Receipt number 9. Councilwoman Denise Ralston, a former prosecutor, leaned forward. "And Officer Malloy?" Gray nodded. "His cases account for 49% of those settlements." Gasps echoed across the chamber. In the gallery, Marcus sat quietly, hat in hand. He wasn't there for spectacle. He was there because systems count on fatigue. And he wasn't tired yet. When asked for comment, he simply said, "I want accountability, not applause." That line made the front page the next morning. The next week, internal documents leaked. A whistleblower sent files to journalists showing email chains between department heads. Subject, complaint backlog, need clean numbers before audit. From Captain H. Mills to L.T.S. Reynolds, reclassify Malloy's 2023 excessive force complaint as training issue and close. DOJ loves tidy ledgers. The leak went public. Mills resigned within 24 hours. Receipt number 10. The dominoes began to fall. 2 supervisors placed on administrative leave. 1 city attorney subpoenaed. A full independent monitor appointed to oversee reform. And at the center of it all, the footage, 37 seconds of truth, looped endlessly on screens around the world. Some called it karma. Others called it justice. Marcus called it documentation. By August, the DOJ released its interim report. Riverbend Police Department engaged in a pattern or practice of conduct that deprives individuals of rights protected by the Constitution and federal law. Evidence demonstrates systemic failures in accountability, supervision, and non-discriminatory policing. The report cited Ellison versus Riverbend as the catalyst case. Agent Gray closed the file and set his pen down. "One man," he said quietly. "One ID card," Voss nodded. "Sometimes paperwork is a revolution." Marcus received a certified copy of the report 2 days later. He read it on his porch, sunlight filtering through the blinds. For the first time in months, the air felt still. He folded the document, slid it into a folder labeled Receipts, and whispered to himself, "Number 11. Because this wasn't just vindication. It was evidence. For every name that never made it to a report, every complaint that got marked unsubstantiated, every bruise called resistance. The system had written its own confession. When federal agents arrive, they don't bring sirens. They bring clipboards. At 7:02 a.m., 3 black sedans parked outside Riverbend PD's glass front lobby. The first man through the door flashed credentials. Gold seal, Department of Justice. The receptionist didn't need explanation. She'd been expecting them since the report leaked. By 7:10, Officer Brent Malloy was summoned upstairs. He entered the conference room, flanked by Union counsel, his badge still clipped to his chest, for now. Across the table sat Special Agent Thomas Gray and Assistant U.S. Attorney Lena Cho, their folders stacked with what looked like ordinary paper but weighed as much as consequence. "Officer Malloy," Gray began evenly, "this interview is recorded under 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 1001. Anything false will constitute additional charges. Do you understand?" Malloy nodded, eyes fixed on the table. Cho slid a document forward. "This is a federal summons. You are being charged with deprivation of rights under color of law. 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 242. Obstruction of justice. 18 U.S.C. Paragraph 505, and destruction of evidence under Para 1519. Each statute landed like a gavel strike. Receipt number 12, the list of charges. Malloy's attorney started to object, but Cho raised a hand. "You'll have full opportunity in court. For now, surrender your service weapon and credentials." Silence. Then the soft scrape of metal on wood as the badge slid across the table. Internal Affairs logged the handover at 07-23-16. Chain of custody notation. Badge, Law 184. Suspended pending criminal review. By 9 a.m., the department issued a press release, effective immediately. Officer Brent Malloy has been placed on unpaid administrative leave pending the outcome of federal proceedings. The Riverbend Police Department will cooperate fully with federal investigators. They always said cooperate fully when the walls were closing in. That afternoon, the City Council chamber filled beyond capacity. The hearing was titled, Accountability and Oversight. Riverbend PD Pattern Investigation. Cameras lined the aisles. The air buzzed with whispered disbelief. Agent Gray stepped to the microphone. "We have established probable cause that multiple civil rights violations occurred within this department. Officer Malloy's conduct was not an anomaly but a symptom." He clicked a remote. The screens behind him illuminated with charts, complaints, payouts, demographic maps. "The Department of Justice hereby recommends immediate federal oversight under 42 U.S.C. Paragraph 13941. Receipt 13. Federal Takeover Statute. Councilwoman Ralston leaned forward. "Agent Gray, will local leadership remain in place?" Gray's answer was clinical. "No. Interim command will report directly to the federal monitor." A collective intake of breath followed. From the back row, Marcus Ellison watched quietly, baseball cap pulled low. He wasn't here to gloat. He was here to witness something rare, an institution learning humility. At noon, the mayor held a press conference flanked by city attorneys. "Today we begin a new chapter," she said, voice tight with rehearsed remorse. "The events surrounding Mr. Ellison's assault have revealed systemic failures. We owe our citizens transparency, reform, and respect." A reporter called out, "Will the city apologize directly to Mr. Ellison?" The mayor hesitated. "Yes, formally. Receipt number 14. Public apology commitment." 2 days later, Marcus stood on the courthouse steps beside his lawyer. Microphones crowded forward. Naomi Pike read from a prepared statement. "Our client accepts the city's apology but reminds us that apology without accountability is performance. We will continue cooperating with federal investigators to ensure sustained oversight." Marcus stepped up to the microphones. His words were brief. "Justice isn't revenge. It's correction. Let's get corrected." That clip aired on every major network. Behind the cameras, Captain Howard Mills signed his own resignation letter. The DOJ report had tied him to falsified internal memos. In the margin of his last signature line, he wrote one sentence in blue ink: "We should have listened when the numbers started talking." Receipt number 15. Command resignation. August 22nd. Federal Courthouse, Kansas City. The arraignment began at 10 a.m., United States versus Brent Malloy, Judge Catherine Burke presiding. Assistant U.S. Attorney Cho read the charges aloud, her tone even but final. The defendant, acting under color of law, did willfully deprive Marcus Ellison of rights secured by the Constitution and laws of the United States, specifically the right to be secure in his person and property and to be free from unreasonable seizure. Malloy stood, hands clasped, face pale. "How do you plead?" His voice cracked. "Not guilty." Burke nodded. "Very well." Bail denied. The gavel fell. The sound carried like closure. Receipt number 16. Indictment entered. That night, news anchors broke the story. Former Officer Malloy indicted on federal civil rights charges. Subheadline: Paperwork prevails. Veterans case triggers. National Review of Body Cam Policies. Even the late-night hosts repeated Marcus's words like scripture. Back at the DOJ office, Raquel Voss compiled the internal memo. Subject: recommended reforms. Riverbend PD1. Automatic body cam activation tied to cruiser ignition and weapon unholster events. 2. Quarterly audits of complaint resolution by independent monitors. 3. Public database of all settlements funded by taxpayers. 4. Mandatory cultural competency. Training for all sworn personnel under 442. USC 2000-5 civilian. Oversight board with subpoena power. Receipt number 17. The reform. Blueprint. Gray added a note at the bottom. Let paper build what arrogance destroyed. September 3rd, Internal Affairs. Hearing room B3E, last vestige of departmental due process played out before a panel of 3. Malloy sat alone. His lawyer had withdrawn. Officer Malloy, the chairwoman read. This hearing concerns termination for cause under Department Policy 512, conduct unbecoming. She listed each count. Falsified reports, dereliction, violation of Policy 306, body cam activation. Do you wish to make a statement? Malloy's voice was a whisper. No one ever stopped me before. The chairwoman nodded sadly. And that is precisely why we are here. Termination. Immediate. Pension forfeited. Receipt. 18. Career ended. In the city archive, Elena Cortez, the night shift technician who'd found the file, was quietly promoted. Her supervisor handed her a small plaque. Integrity is doing the right thing when the lights are dim, she smiled. Sometimes the lights are cameras. Receipt number 19. Whistleblower reward. A week later, the Riverbend Police Department formally transitioned under federal monitor control. Training sessions began. Old manuals were shredded, new ones printed under the heading Dignity and Accountability Initiative. The first page quoted Marcus Ellison verbatim. "I didn't bring anger. I brought the paperwork. Every recruit read it aloud during orientation. September 18th, public hearing on reform implementation. Councilwoman Ralston addressed the crowd. For 15 years, complaints vanished into filing cabinets. Today, those cabinets are open. Change doesn't come from outrage. It comes from evidence." She turned toward Marcus in the front row. "And sometimes it comes from people who refuse to be silent." The audience stood in quiet applause. Receipt number 20. Public recognition. Later that night, Marcus sat in his truck outside the plaza, his plaza, watching workers repaint the faded lines. The torn halves of his old ID, now laminated together, hung from the mirror like proof of survival. His phone buzzed. A text from Naomi. DOJ confirmed, Malloy plea deal off the table. Trial date set for December 12th. He typed back one line. "Good. Let the record stay public." He started the engine, the headlights washing over the sign that now read Rivergate Plaza, veteran-owned and operated. The wind rustled the flag above the pharmacy. For the first time, it felt honest. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it files forms, stamps dates, and waits for signatures. But when the signatures finally come, they don't fade. They stay, inked into the story of a nation learning to hold itself accountable. Receipt number 21. Accountability achieved. 3 weeks after the federal indictment, Riverbend felt quieter, not peaceful, but aware. The same plaza where it all began was no longer just concrete and storefronts. It had become a landmark of accountability. News crews had left, the crowd had thinned, but locals still paused at the veteran-owned sign, their gazes lingering a little longer than before. Inside the pharmacy, the same clerk who had filmed the original confrontation smiled when Marcus walked in. "Mr. Ellison," she said softly. "Good to see you." He nodded. "Good to be seen." He handed over his prescription slip. For the first time in months, the clerk didn't ask for identification. She already knew. When he left, the bell over the door chimed like a punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence. The city's official apology ceremony was held on the courthouse steps, the same stairs where everything began. It wasn't performative. No grand speeches or photo ops. Just truth, carefully spoken. Mayor Hinton adjusted the microphone. "On behalf of this city," she began, "we acknowledge the harm done to Mr. Ellison and his family. We recognize that the actions of Officer Malloy and the institutional failures that enabled him were not isolated events, but symptoms of systemic neglect." Her voice wavered slightly before steadying. "Mr. Ellison, this city failed to honor your service, your dignity, and your humanity. For that, we are sorry." Applause rose, not explosive, but respectful. Marcus stepped forward, holding a folded piece of paper. "Madam Mayor," he said quietly, "I appreciate the apology. But what matters now is whether the city will change its paperwork. The kind that buries complaints, that hides settlements, that lets people disappear into policy." "I don't need more words. I need signatures." The mayor nodded. "You have my word. And soon, my signature." Receipt number 22. Written reform pledge. 2 days later, he was invited to address the new recruit class at the Riverbend Police Academy. He walked into the lecture hall dressed in the same plain polo and khakis he'd worn that day in the parking lot. No medals, no script, just presence. The cadets stood when he entered. He waved them back down. "Don't stand for me," he said. "Stand for what you're supposed to protect." He paced slowly, hands behind his back. "The system trains you to see control as safety. But there's a difference between control and respect. Respect doesn't need to shout. It documents, it verifies, it listens." He paused in front of the screen where his own viral quote was projected. "I didn't bring anger. I brought the paperwork." That line wasn't clever, he said. It was survival. If you remember nothing else, remember that when someone tells you who they are, don't argue. Verify. When you put on that badge, you're not carrying authority. You're carrying accountability, one cadet raised his hand. Sir, what do you think justice really means? Marcus smiled faintly. Justice means the report matches the truth. The room was silent, not out of fear, but understanding. Receipt number 23. Education through lived example. In Washington, the Department of Justice finalized the Riverbend Reform Agreement. The preamble read, "This memorandum of understanding establishes federal oversight, civilian review, and quarterly transparency audits for the Riverbend Police Department, ensuring compliance with the Constitution and restoration of community trust." Signed by Thomas Gray, Mayor Hinton, and U.S. Attorney Lena Cho. Receipt number 24. Reform codified. Meanwhile, Marcus's attorney, Naomi Pike, filed the final civil claim. It wasn't about money. It was about record correction. The lawsuit sought an official court declaration of wrongful arrest and public expungement of all related entries. The judge granted it in under 10 minutes. Case 25-0712A is hereby vacated and sealed. The defendant is exonerated of all charges and recognized as the rightful victim of unlawful arrest and assault under color of law. Receipt, Busa 25. Record cleared. Later that afternoon, Marcus met with Officer Kendra Lee, the digital evidence technician who had quietly preserved the footage. They sat on a bench near the river. "I never thanked you," Marcus said. "You don't have to," she replied. "You thanked me when you didn't give up." He looked out at the water. "Funny thing about cameras," he said. "They don't create justice. They just make it undeniable," Kendra smiled. Undeniable is a good start. Receipt number 26. Whistleblower acknowledged. In the following months, the Department of Public Safety rolled out new training modules under a program called Ellison Standards. Every cadet, officer, and supervisor was required to pass. Policy DAR 306A. Body cam activation. Protocol devices must be activated at initial citizen contact and remain on until completion of all official interactions. Any lapse constitutes misconduct, subject to discipline or termination. Policy 307B. Community respect. Mandate. All personnel shall address civilians by sir or ma'am unless otherwise requested. Derogatory or discriminatory language constitutes grounds for dismissal. Policy 308C. Transparency and retention. All footage stored in redundant cloud systems for a minimum of 5 years. Deletion requires dual authorization and DOJ audit log approval. 3 pages of reform. All because a veteran refused to stay silent. Receipt November 27. Systemic change operationalized. By winter, the plaza's new helipad had been repainted. The letters H1 gleamed white against black asphalt. Marcus stood with his son, Lieutenant Aaron Ellison, watching the last stripe dry. "You ever think it'd go this far?" Aaron asked. Marcus chuckled. "No, but I always knew it'd go somewhere." The younger man nodded toward the building. "You're on the state board now, community oversight, right?" "Yeah," Marcus said. 1 meeting a month. Mostly listening. Sometimes correcting. "You ever miss the quiet?" Marcus smiled. "Quiet's dangerous. That's when the paperwork disappears." They both laughed. A gust of wind rippled the flag overhead, and for the first time it didn't feel ironic. That spring, Marcus's story became a case study at law schools nationwide. Professors used it to teach color of law violations and accountability policy. One slide in the lecture deck quoted his line verbatim, "The law isn't power. It's paperwork that protects the powerless." Receipt number 28. Justice institutionalized, but not every restoration is public. One afternoon, Marcus received a letter postmarked from a federal facility in Illinois. No return address, just a handwritten line from one man to another. He opened it slowly. "Mr. Ellison, I've had a lot of time to think about that day. The words I used, the lies I told. I can't take them back, but I can tell the truth now. You were right. I forgot the job had limits. I let the badge replace my conscience. If forgiveness is too much to ask, I'll settle for acknowledgement. You made the system face itself. I hope you find peace. B.M. Marcus read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the same folder as the DOJ report, receipt number 29, remorse recorded. He didn't reply. Some things are better left on paper, where they can't be edited or erased. The city eventually erected a small plaque at the plaza entrance. It read, "On this ground, a man's dignity was torn in two. On this ground, truth stitched it back together. May every witness remember, justice requires documentation." People left flowers, medals, notes. Marcus visited once, early in the morning before the crowds arrived. He touched the plaque and whispered, "That's enough, not triumph, not bitterness, just enough." At home that evening, he opened his old VA file, the one that once defined him, and slipped the laminated ID halves inside. He closed it, wrote one new word across the cover, restored. Then he turned off the lamp. The house settled into silence, the kind earned through persistence, not peace. Justice had done what it could. The law had spoken. But dignity had spoken louder. 6 months after the verdict, Riverbend changed in ways that didn't make headlines but mattered more than any headline could. The courthouse where it happened, the same steps where an ID was torn in half and a man's dignity was questioned, now bore a new bronze plaque. On this ground, accountability began. On this ground, the law remembered its promise. People stopped there, not to take selfies, but to reflect. Veterans saluted quietly. Parents pointed out the spot to their children. Officers walked past slower than before, as if gravity pulled a little harder here. Inside the Department of Justice, the Riverbend model became a national framework. New guidelines went out to every U.S. Attorney's office. All body cam data must be archived with dual redundancy and third-party verification. Complaint. Patterns exceeding 25% deviation trigger automatic civil. Review. Settlement payments must be disclosed. In annual public reports. Receipts became reform. Within a year, 15 other cities voluntarily adopted the Ellison Standard, a system that began with one torn card and a man who refused to lose his calm. In a law school lecture hall at Howard University, Professor Raquel Voss clicked to the final slide of her presentation. On it, the same frame that had gone viral, Marcus Ellison standing in the courtroom, steady, composed, his hands folded as truth finally turned its gaze on power. She faced her students. "What you're looking at isn't spectacle," she said. "It's structure. This is what evidence looks like when dignity refuses to vanish." A student raised his hand. "Do you think the system ever really changes?" Voss smiled faintly. "Systems don't change. People inside them do. And when enough people change, the paperwork does too." In Riverbend, the police academy walls displayed the new code of conduct printed in bold, centered beneath the department crest. Integrity is not what you do when someone is watching. It's what you record when no one is. Underneath, smaller, inspired by the Ellison case, July 2025, each recruit signed it before receiving their badge. The ritual was small, almost quiet, but it carried the gravity of oath and lesson. Marcus kept his life simple. He declined interviews, refused book deals, ignored sponsorship offers. His son Aaron joked, "Dad, you could have retired twice over by now." Marcus only smiled. Some stories shouldn't be sold. They should be remembered. He split his time between running the plaza and volunteering at the VA Outreach Center. Most days you could find him fixing the coffee machine, helping new vets with claims, or reminding them, keep every receipt. Even when it's small, the system listens better when you've got proof. Sometimes reporters still came. Sometimes he said yes. Usually he said no. When he did speak, it was brief. Anger burns fast, he'd say. Paperwork lasts longer. That line became its own kind of scripture, printed on protest signs, classroom walls, courthouse bulletins. In November, the U.S. Civil Rights Commission released its national assessment. Riverbend ranked among the fastest improving departments in the country. Civilian complaint resolution rate up 68%, officer retraining completion. Rate, 100%. Use of force incidents down 41% in 6 months. Public trust rating up 32%. The numbers weren't perfect, but they were proof that something had shifted. Not just in law, But in culture, when asked to comment, Marcus responded the only way he knew how. Progress isn't peace, but it's a start. Winter came early that year. Snow dusted the helipad like flour over a fresh page. Marcus stood watching his son's helicopter descend, this time not in chaos but ceremony. The city had arranged a Veterans Day salute at Rivergate Plaza. When the rotors slowed and silence returned, Aaron stepped out, carrying a folded flag. "They wanted you to have this," he said. Marcus unfolded it halfway, then shook his head. "Keep it. You earned it," Aaron smiled. "So did you." They stood in the cold, father and son, surrounded by the quiet hum of a city still rebuilding its conscience. In living rooms across America, the video that had started it all continued to circulate, not as outrage bait, but as a reminder. Students analyzed it in ethics classes. Journalists used it as a case study in transparency. Activists cited it in local council meetings. For once, a viral moment hadn't burned out. It had built something. In the DOJ archive, the final memo on the case was marked closed, reform implemented. But beneath that line, someone, maybe Voss, maybe Gray, had written in pen, "Justice isn't a moment. It's maintenance." That note stayed in the file. Receipt 30, permanence recorded. And still, the ripple spread. In Chicago, a young woman filed her own misconduct complaint and cited Ellison v. Riverbend as precedent. In Phoenix, an officer refused an unlawful order, quoting Marcus's own words. In Atlanta, a group of high school students formed a civic club called the Paperwork Project. Their slogan, document. Don't disappear. Each ripple carried the same rhythm. Calm, factual, unstoppable. On the one-year anniversary, the courthouse lawn hosted a small gathering. No banners, no speeches. Just people, veterans, teachers, officers, kids, leaving folded papers under the plaque. Each sheet contained a single sentence beginning with, "I witnessed," or "I learned." By sunset, hundreds of pages covered the base of the monument, white against bronze like petals around a wound that finally started to heal. One of them read, "I used to think justice was loud. Now I know it can whisper and still be heard." That night, Marcus sat by his window with a cup of tea, watching snowfall erase the footprints on his porch. The world outside was clean again, at least for a moment. He opened his notebook and wrote a line he hadn't said aloud before. "Dignity shouldn't need a defense, but if it ever does, make sure you have the paperwork." He underlined it once, then closed the cover. A news anchor's voice drifted, faintly from a neighbor's TV. The Ellison case continues, to inspire national conversation on civil rights, enforcement, and local accountability reform. Experts call it one of the most transformative justice precedents in decades. Marcus smiled to himself. "Precedent," he murmured. "That's just another word for proof. And if you listen closely, the story never really ends, because somewhere right now, another phone is recording, another email is being sent, another citizen is quietly, methodically documenting truth. The next reform is already being written, line by line, in quiet acts of courage no one will ever broadcast. Justice doesn't always arrive in sirens or speeches. Sometimes it walks in wearing a calm expression, carrying a folder, and says softly, 'I'm here to file something.' That's how it started for Marcus Ellison. That's how it continues, in every place where dignity is tested and truth still insists on being written down. If you've ever been told your story doesn't matter, document it. If you've ever been silenced, record it. If you've ever been dismissed, save the email, keep the timestamp, hold the line. Because the paper trail of dignity is how nations remember what they almost forgot. Share this story if you believe dignity should never need permission. Because sometimes justice wears quiet shoes and leaves footprints you can still follow.